For students, um, they actually the online learning started on February in China for mid and high schools and the universities. A few of primary schools opened the class online because the Ministry of Education think the long time screen for for children will harm to their eyesight. So not every primary school opened it for online learning. And for now, but students are back to their schools, still keeping a distance with each other, especially in the cafeteria. I think schools are not allowed for three or more people sit on the same desks, on the same table. Like they restrict the amount of people entering the cafeteria so that it could prevent it. And I think that there is an interesting point for controlling the cases. Where in China they have the scan code for everyone, and the residents need to sign up online for a scan code. So the code can track where you have been to the city traveling history, or they have the GPA on their phones, so they can track where they go. If the code said you have been to like some gathering places, they will restrict you and reject you from buying things like that, like entering the market. So
So
I
like
think
in
it's an amazing one for controlling it. They have the code, so they scan your
Mhm.
code. So
It's like before you enter
yeah,
any like public place, they would scan this code and
yeah,
kind of like see where you've been. Oh,
like
interesting.
pharmacies or market or restaurant. They'll not only like using the thermometer, but also the scan code.
Ah,
The code said if code it's red, so you can't go in unless it's green. You can
okay.
entering for public
Makes
space.
sense. Hmm.
Um,
Like, mhm.
can I say something?
Oh yeah.
So, like Sky was saying, we have something similar. Well, not exactly similar. So, it's this app that we're all supposed to download. It's called Arogya Setu. What this app does is that you have to have your GPS and location, your GPS and your Bluetooth on at all times. So, through Bluetooth, it lets you know if you've come in contact with anyone who has been affected with the virus, who's been
Oh,
tested positive for the COVID-19. So this has actually become the fastest downloading app in India. And it also has like an assessment test that you can take, which asks you if you have any symptoms or certain questions. Which, if you do, you will be put in touch with the healthcare professionals.
Um,
and is this something the government has done, or is it
Yes,
just
this
an
is
app?
actually
Okay.
it's by the government.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think from like a technological standpoint, I think these advancements in technology, they're very cool. Like how Sky mentioned, how you need to scan a barcode before entering, and and if it's red, then you can't enter. And like how Kobe mentioned, that if that there's an app that uses Bluetooth to tell you whether or not you've been in contact with someone that has been tested positive. I think this is like really cool. And I really like how people are coming together to create these innovations to protect people. And I really think that necessity is the mother of creativity. So I guess in the future, like I'm excited. I'm hopeful for the future.
yeah,
I think that's something that's really exciting, like the pandemic being now, is because it's a time where we have a lot of this technology, a lot of understanding about like healthcare, health policies, and things like that. So it's definitely an
Yeah,
interesting time, pandemic.
well, I think that our technological innovations have led to a scope of things that we never thought possible and made our lives so much easier. It also poses its own set of problems. There are a lot of data privacy issues. But
Hmm.
every day you see a news about content being stolen and putting on the dark web. Users data, being uploaded on the dark web and being sold for, like millions of dollars or bitcoins or whatever. So that is also there with, like, when you use, like, for Zoom was in such a huge controversy about routing its users' data to China, and for how lots of users' data was stolen and hacked and was put on the dark web. So it also has all of these issues that I think we should be more concerned about.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And like recent stuff with like the whole Facebook thing. Like a lot of companies do use data as something as a commodity, which is definitely something. Definitely should be more policies about like managing that and data privacy and things like that. Especially now, like with the whole like GPS tracking. Um, I guess it is something that's necessary, like for the pandemic, for contact tracing and things like that. But again, like it is important to make sure that that doesn't get overboard and become a regular part of our
Yeah.
lives.
True.
Um, I think okay. Speaking like from Canada, we haven't had anything like that, like the GPS tracking, the apps, and things like that. So the contact tracing hasn't been done in the same way. Um, I think it was mainly just focused on like social distancing measures, making sure you have good hand hygiene and things like that. And I think a lot of people did follow it, which is why the curve, like the government officials have been saying that the curve is starting to flatten, and they're thinking about reopening the economy a little bit. Um, and like with regards to like students, right now universities, high school, colleges, they're all closed. Everything's online learning. No one really has in-person classes, but the government has established like funds called like a fund called CESB that will be releasing soon, which is just giving funds for students who might have lost the opportunity to do an internship or a job and who might have lost like a source of income. And there's also something called CERB, which is the COVID emergency response benefit. So again, that's for people who've been affected by COVID-19, who've lost their jobs. So it's good to see those social support programs.
Yeah, one thing to note actually about the contact tracing stuff. So I'm pretty sure Alberta actually released a contact tracing app not so long ago, and I'm not really too familiar with like how effective it is, but a lot of people have already downloaded it and it's already been launched. So that's something interesting to note.
Oh, wait, this is only for Alberta, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of neat because, like, in Ontario, I know the only real way you can tell whether or not people are actually maintaining social distance is if you like, go outside to stores and like essential businesses. And like, you can see it's not really how the government so much is handling it, it's more so how the businesses are handling it because like different stores have different policies. For example, one grocery store, you can't come in without masks, face shields, and gloves, and you have to like sanitize everything, and they only allow like 40 people in, whereas other stores like don't even care if you're wearing a mask or not. So it's kind of interesting to see what happens when you have government regulating social distancing and when you have businesses regulating it.
Yeah.
I guess like going back, as students, how has this pandemic personally affected you? And like what changes have you seen because of this pandemic? And I guess how have you adapted to these changes?
So for me, well, we didn't have much of an online learning because most of our syllabus had already gotten over while the lockdown and the quarantine started. So most of it got over, but what was remaining, our teachers attempted online learning, but it didn't really work out all that well. But we kind of managed to sort it through. So for now, as I wouldn't probably be taking up my semester exams unless the situation gets better. If it doesn't, they told us that the first year and second year students, for me it's only 3 years, so first year and second year students, our grades will be calculated based on scores we've obtained in our previous semester, and 50% of that plus 50% of all of the scores that we've gotten on our internal tests and assessments during this semester. And also I'm very close to a couple of third year students, who were just finishing, and it's really hit them hard because they were all planning on doing their masters or working, but now none of that is possible. So they're all mostly taking a gap year to think things through and wait it out and try again the year after.
I personally just changed my study form from going to schools to having class online, and I'm also having summer courses that shifted online. But talking about one family in China, they can't meet their relatives during Spring Festival. The Chinese the pandemic spreaded during late January and February, which is the Spring Festival. It's the Chinese New Year. This is the most important festival for Chinese. Some of my relatives only back home during this holiday, but this year they can't. So they come back to their hometown and meet their families. That's what I heard from my parents. So some of my like grandma and grandpa, they live in countryside, and my parents can't meet them. They only have to like calling them and preventing like how I can say, I just called to my grandpa and grandma. They notice they have to keep in social distance, but seems like the elderly doesn't care the situation. They think it's okay. But I still worried about them. For like the elderly is like easily too susceptible for this virus. And they like they like not put too much care on it. So I'm actually concerned about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess, I mean, you do see that like everywhere. Like some people not really thinking, not really worrying too much about what would happen to them.
Yes.
Yeah, and definitely like adding on, like you mentioned, like the Spring Festival, that was probably something people found new, unreasonable, because social isolation is something that could it's not the same, like it's not something that would always follow social distancing and quarantining, but it is a possibility, and I think something that's helping us all stay connected. So it's still good that you're able to contact them, like video call them and things like that. So it's good for us who have the technology, who can stay in touch and avoid that social isolation. But in a lot of parts of the world, and a lot of communities that like who don't have the technology, it's definitely a bigger like a huge problem. It's like